Welcome to the Book of Huey, featuring our host, Huey Booker, aka Hulito, aka El Grande Papi Chulito, aka Lil Big Daddy, the original faux Dominican, the king of unfuckwitability in all of his regal, debonair godliness. With his stunner shades, receding hairline, and struggle beard alike, took a risk and launched the Book of Huey podcast. Huey has the dopest, funniest, most insightful conversations with his friends. And within all the shenanigans and jokes, there are frequent profound moments and lots of quotable gems. And yet the idea that other folks could benefit from, or at the very least, be highly amused by listening in on these convos. He created a safe, judgment-free space to discuss love, sex, life, dating, relationships, fuckery, and advice with raw honesty and humor. This is your announcer, Rebecca Lee. So, this is what had happened previously on the Book of Huey. Innovation strategist, inventor, business coach, public servant, mother, globetrotter, and mogul on the rise, Dunticia Seymour came and towed it down. Yes, y'all, toe. T-O-E for that ass. Dating and love ring the most true for her, but not that puppy dog sappy kind of love. No. Hers will be the type of love that materializes in a kingdom of shit happening. Hers will be a partnership. She'll love someone that loves growth and their grind just as much as she does. Especially in this day and age when men are suing women for alimony. Yeah, nah, bruh. For Book of Huey, Chapter 2, Verse 2. Or better. We're grinding. We're shaking and moving to accomplish our goals, grow our tribe, and better serve our communities. We're not about dating people with too much time on their hands and will not be made to feel guilty about it. In 2018, we're going to be intentional about how we spend our time, who we spend it with, and the types of things we do when we're together. The moments and experiences we share with others need to be quality. For all the listeners out there that are new here, welcome to the life of next level shit. This is your announcer, Rebecca Lee. And now on to our host, Huey Booker, featuring this week's guest, Viola Davies, also known as the Sexy Poet. After last year's release of her first book, Tales from the Sexy Poet, To Have Loved and Lusted, she's right back to tell us about her next project, Tales from the Sexy Poet, for the not-so-tame and tight.
What up? This is your boy Huey Booker. We're back for another episode of the Book of Huey podcast. We're here this week joined by a good friend of mine, Viola Davies. Introduce yourself, baby.
Hi, this is Viola Davies. I am the Sexy Poet.
Ooh, I like that. Why do you call yourself the Sexy Poet?
Well, I am, that you asked because you know me so well, but I am a sensual, passionate person.
Really?
Really. And I write poetry. I started out writing poetry, but now I also do poetry and short stories. I am the Sexy Poet.
All right. Now, like you just said, you started off writing poetry. You do short stories. So of all the creative outlets, why writing? And poetry in particular?
Well, it just literally brings me peace. I find a certain quiet in the stress of my life when I write. So the poetry kind of is what started to come out of me first, and it just kind of evolved into short stories. But yeah, the poetry is my favorite. It's quick and dirty, and I can get down what I'm feeling at the time that I'm feeling, and it's a kind of a snapshot of a moment.
Now, like your poetry, which I know is more on the side of the erotic and the passionate, are your short stories in a similar vein, or are they somewhat different in terms of genre?
Well, it's kind of a mixture of both. One of my favorites is Train Stop, and it's a short story about a guy I met on a train, and it's completely random. So it wasn't necessarily what I would consider erotica, but it is. It's just, again, a snapshot in time, but a longer snapshot in that it was the story of ongoing meetings that I would see him every day.
And thinking about your bio, you mentioned something about your work and that it's focused on demystifying female sexuality. What do you mean by that? as someone who, might think about that phrase, I mean, I know what it means, but pretend I don't know what it means.
Okay. When I say demystifying female sexuality, I really am speaking to what has been my goal in this book, is to dedicate it to wide open women. There's this whole kind of framework of discussion of how women should approach sexuality, and that we are these chaste creatures, and that we are not the aggressors, and that we should wait for sex. That is just not the truth for every woman. I want to speak for those women who feel like, yes, sex is special. It's really special when you're having it. There's a lot of discussion of what I call the sex on a pedestal women. They put sex on a pedestal, and it's just this thing that's beautiful and it's spiritual, and you shouldn't touch it until, the man shows up. And I'm just like, honey, it's not that it's special while it's sitting up on the shelf. It's special when you're actually doing it, when you're using it, when you're with a man that you enjoy it with.
Or woman.
Or woman, exactly. So it really is a matter of, there's a whole lot of unspoken discussion. Because, yes, there's the myth about it, but there's unspoken discussion about women and their sexuality. And, that discussion it bothers some people. And I like that.
I like it too. Now, tell us, you mentioned 2 books. So your first book, tell us about the title, the overall sort of theme, and then, now the second book that you are going to be releasing pretty soon.
So the first one is called Tales from the Sexy Poets I Have Loved and Lusted. And like I said, it's a romantic, erotic book of poems. And the second book is also Tales from the Sexy Poet. And this one is for the not so tame and tight. I would say it's a deeper romance, and it's a hungrier eroticism. There are a couple of crossovers. If you read both books, you'll be like, oh, yeah, I kind of know what she's talking about. That was from the first book. So there's like literally 2 that I speak to. One of my favorites in To Have Loved and Lusted is called The Game. I have actually done that at a lot of spoken word events at most of the busboys and poets circuit, because it's one that speaks to everyone, man, woman, it doesn't matter. Everybody's been in the game. I say either you're playing it or you've been played. There is then a corresponding poem for the not so tame and tight called Game Over. There is one called Weak Love, and that follow on in the second book is called Final Conversation. And those 2 sets, I would call them, are inspired by 2 people in particular. So it really is something that I felt like opened me up in To Have Loved and Lusted and gave me closure in for the not so tame and tight. But besides that, the first book, it was really fun. As I told you before, it was completely unintentional. I did not set out to write a book of poetry, but it happened, and I'm glad it did. And then the second one was definitely intentional. There's some great stuff in there, so I'm really excited about it.
I'm glad you said that, because I was definitely about to ask you, what made you decide to write a book in the first place. You had an interesting story about a friend of yours, you said, who had been pressing you about, writing and sort of emailed you a bunch of stuff. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about this story?
So Tales from the Sexy Poet came to be because I was turning 39, right? I had this thing, like at the end of every kind of decade of my life, I had done something, right? So I grew up in New York City. I used public transportation all my life. And so for my 19th birthday, I got my driver's license. Then for my 29th birthday, I got my first tattoo. And then for my 39th birthday, I got on stage at Busboys and Poet, and I recited this poem that I wrote called I've Had Good. The implication is I've had good sex. And so all my friends who came out to celebrate my 39th with me, one of my friends, she is a business developer, and she was like, you need to write a book. And I kept telling her, I don't have time to write a book. But throughout my year before turning 40, I was just like something would happen and everything would come to me and I'd write something. And then I'd send it to my group of friends. Finally, she was harassing me so much about writing a book. But I was like, I don't have time. I am raising children. I got a busy corporate job. I'm not writing a book. She said, yes, you are. And she basically emailed me back everything I had been emailing her over the year. Basically, I had already written a book. And so then, it was a matter of putting it together, or formatting, figuring out what I wanted to say, how I wanted to organize it. And then it came together. And yeah, it became a book. But again, it wasn't something that I set out to do like the second one. And so the first book kind of just birthed itself, really. But like I said, the second one, it definitely was intentional. I feel like now it made me recognize myself as a writer.
What do you find to be the most edifying part of your writing process?
Oh, some days it is completely a connection to my being. And I say that because one of these poems in the second book, I literally wrote out of my dream. I woke up, rolled over. I always keep a pen and paper next to my bed. I just started writing and all of it came out at once. And I thought, this cannot not be who I am, So that part, it really, the edification is that it really alerts me to who I am. But then there's the other part where I find therapy in my writing. And I say that because there are a couple of poems, one specifically called My Battle with Beauty, that it made me healthy about some things I had been struggling with for my entire adult life. I don't know, lately people have been talking about, unfortunately, I do not remember the actress's name right now, but basically she's talking about the pretty privilege in Hollywood. It resonates with me because of how I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and how much it meant to be pretty and how much it informed me as a young girl about my perspective on men because of that's what attracts them. That's, it starts very, very early for young girls. I struggled with it for years. I struggled with it. So that part of my edification for the book it's cathartic for me.
What, this is going to be like off schedule for the list of questions that I had, but at what point in your, I'm going to assume adult life, did you sort of find yourself on the other side of the angst and conflict that you felt with this idea of pretty, and how you either rejected it or identified with that struggle?
Oh my God, honestly, you will laugh because it was recent. Like, I'm in my 40s, about to be mid 40s. It was very recent. What brought it on was my daughter. I have a 15-year-old, and about a year ago, she started wearing makeup. She was in high school, and I struggled with it because I didn't wear makeup in high school. I barely still wear makeup, honestly.
You don't need it.
I don't need it. Exactly. And I get that. And she doesn't need it either. She just loves it. And to her, it's an accessory. And I was struggling with it because in my life, because I was struggling with being pretty, I didn't want to enhance my beauty at all. Like, to make somebody look at me even more? No way. No. And I grew up dancing, so I wore performance makeup. So it just was a whole big pitfall of like, oh my God, this is something I have to deal with because I don't want to burden my daughter with my issues with this. And so I really had to look at like how I was looking at beauty and, the perspective of enhancing your beauty and makeup and, the hair and the nails. I'm not one for getting my nails done, but she loves that stuff. Like, she wants to go get her gel manicure and she wants to get her hair did. And she, she's ordering makeup at multiple palettes at a time. And I'm like, I don't even know. My daughter had taught me how to do a winged eye. Not that you should know what that is.
Yeah, I have no idea. None at all.
But it's one of those things where I'm just like, oh my God, YouTube now. We didn't have YouTube when I was growing up. So I'm just like, I had to deal with it. I really had to deal with it and figure out what was holding me back. And it really was this kind of approach where I was sexualized at a very young age by adult men. You know, I was 10 years old and I had a body, you know, I developed early. So by the time that I was 12, I looked like a fully grown woman, you know, hips, tits, ass, the whole 9 yards. So it was a struggle for me to accept myself and accept that beauty without wanting to hide from it. I did not want my daughter to have to feel like it was something that she needed to hide from.
You know, your story, I can't say it resonates with me. I mean, I'm not a woman, but my best friend, she also shared with me maybe a year and a half ago her issues with the word sexy and it being applied to her. She mentioned how only recently did it not anger her when people would call her sexy because, you know, she said she developed early and for her, it was just striking and alarming that all these grown men, especially men who like, let's say were like family friends or people from the neighborhood or whatever, just how aggressive they were and sexualizing her. And she just associated sexiness with this thing that she just did not want to participate in. Even now, you know, she's in her mid-30s. It's hard for her to hear that and hear a compliment and not something vulgar or demeaning or something. So it's interesting to hear because I guess it's something that, I mean, I guess I never really thought about. I mean,
But you think about it as a man when you're walking down the street and you see a group of young girls, you don't think about that because it's obvious to you that they're school kids, right? Because that's not the kind of guy you are. But if you saw that same young girl and she was walking down the street by herself and didn't have her backpack, but just was dressed, you would think she was a grown woman and you would be trying to hit her up.
No, I mean, I know, like, well, I gotta say, like, I see some freaking 20-somethings and I'm like, I don't know, boo, you look like a 12-year-old to me, that's weird. But no, you're right, I get your point. It's odd. And I mean, even, I feel like I'm very fortunate enough that the type of men who would not care that someone is underage or the type of men who would make predatory comments about, oh, when she grows up or whatever. Like, I've been fortunate enough to not have a lived experience with those type of men around because I feel like if I did, I'd break their fucking face. But that's neither here nor there. Now, much along the same vein of conversation, I know that, or even as my, you know, I'm an artist as well. I know that a lot of what we do in terms of creating and sharing our creations and birthing our visions, whether it's through music or dance or poetry, we invest a lot of our lived experience into our work. So is there a poem or two that best speaks to your experience fighting through your challenges of accepting pretty and discovering your sense of sexiness for yourself? I guess more specifically for the first book?
I don't think there's much of it in the first book just because I hadn't gotten to that part of who I am, in that the first book was more so about the heartbreak that I had gone through with my divorce and kind of the different flavors of love that I was experiencing after my divorce. So it was more so situational, I guess. And like I said, again, wasn't intending to write it. So to have love part is definitely more situational, more things that spoke to me as to what I was going through. I mean, one of my favorite pieces in there is called Championship Match. And it literally is about the end of my marriage and how it came undone and what it felt like being in the boxing match. You know, there are things in there like that definitely spoke to what I was going through at the time, but not necessarily kind of the therapeutic piece. It was therapeutic in that it was helping me get through my disaster of a life at the time. But this kind of therapy in the second book is a little different. But, I think one of the themes that flows throughout both of the books is that centering of loving myself, figuring out what that means for me. And like I said, in the second book, it means getting over the being pretty part. It means knowing who I am as a sexual woman, as a wide open woman. It meant something different in the first book, in that knowing how to heal from a broken heart, knowing how to handle being a newly independent woman, and figuring out what all this means in my life of being a faithful spiritual woman, being this dynamic mother, being a daughter and friend and employee, and all of those things pulling at me to pay attention. That's what writing did. It forced me to pay attention to the areas of my life.
What's interesting, you keep saying wide open woman, and I know that that's one of the poems you actually sent me to really focus on when, doing my research to set up this episode. That poem, it opens up with you saying, I'm a wide open woman, mentally, spiritually, and sexually free. I'm not hurting anyone by being me. I think that's just a beautiful way to not only open up, it's a beautiful line, but I'm not hurting anyone by being me. I just love that. I'm going to think about why I love it a little bit more, but why don't you tell us why you wrote that?
So that one, I would actually say it goes back to, and I find this hilarious, but Wide Open Woman is the end of the second book. It goes to something I wrote at the beginning of the first book. It's a piece called Self-Love. It goes along with, I say, nothing makes me feel less than because I have a foundation on which to stand. I love myself in all of my magnificence, with or without a man. And so that beginning of the first book and this ending of the second book, it kind of brings it all together, because that is the point, is that I am who I am because I have my foundation is solid. I don't falter because of the way the wind blows. This part about being a wide open woman and being who I am and not hurting anybody is because I'm doing me, right? That's the whole point of this. That's the point of my writing. That's the point of my living, is to do me. If you can get to that point where you are comfortable with yourself, it is joy, unmatched joy, Huey.
I agree. Now, I'm going to do a quick plug for my dear friend, Vi. You are a professional, someone who's on the other side of divorce. You are a dating artist, avid runner, a great parent, Christian. You're all these wonderful things that you're very dedicated towards and passionate towards. I want to know a little bit more about how you define or continue to define and live your truth out loud, in particular for your son, who's a young man, and your daughter, who's, what did you say, she's 15? So, she's pretty much like establishing her wings, so to speak, as a teenager now. She's learning how to fly and soar. So what are some of the ways that you're very intentional about how you live so that, your son has an example of a strong woman who's living out loud, and your daughter can see that as well?
For one, I am a communicator with my children, with everyone. I mean, I live transparently. My children know this about me. They can come, and they do, to me with everything and anything. And they are completely comfortable having conversations of any nature with me. And I really, really value that. I mean, my son is almost 20 years old, and he'll still talk to me about whatever, what's going on with his sex life, his non-sex life, his, whatever's happening. He knows that I am more than just his mom. I'm a confidant. I am a friend. My daughter, she has the same access and the same level of trust in our relationship. That is one of the things I am most proud of. But they see me. They see how hard I work. The best thing my daughter said to me once was that she'd never seen me give up at anything, that I'm a hard worker. And my son remarks how disciplined I am. He says, I try to be just like you, Mom. Like, oh, there are some days I don't want to, but you know what? Stuff has to get done. And so you just get up and do it.
Right.
And my running has infected my family. Like, my daughter is not with the long distance. She is about speed, but my son has picked up long distance. He ran the Army 10 miler with me in October. We ran the Tough Mudder together in March. My mother, my 60-plus-year-old mother, has run her first 5K because of me.
Yeah.
So I just think the fact that I am living my truth, it's rubbing off on them. They see it and they're proud. I hope that I continue to make them proud. But, it's a struggle every day because you think you're going along great and then fall right on your face. So you just never know.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about this life that we live. But I love that you use my tagline, live your truth. It's such a beautiful, powerful thing, I think, to rally around. So in that same vein of conversation, of course, I try to keep it so that all my episodes of this Book of Huey podcast are within the world of our 5 topics: love, sex, dating, relationships, and fuckery. So which 2 resonate the most with you, and tell us why?
Okay. Obviously the sex, and relationship. And I would say the relationships are, with yourself, with others, with your faith. It's not just the relationship as, traditional definition of the word. I have my constant part of my foundation is my spiritual faith. And, so many have asked, well, how can you do this kind of writing and still be, Christian? And I'm like, first of all, let me tell you, I'll tell anybody, I am an undisciplined Christian and a cafeteria Catholic. So I'm going to the buffet and I'm getting exactly what I need. Am I taking everything? Nah, buddy, I'm not kissing nobody's ring. I don't believe in everything that the church preaches, but I do believe in Christ, and he's a part of my life. It's a part of my life when my legs are in the air and when they're not. That's just who I am, and he doesn't judge me, so why should you?
Now, of the remaining topics, love, dating, and fuckery, was there any one that you initially rejected, or it stirred up a memory or some sort of sentiment in you that you want to share?
Love is such not difficult is not the right word. It's a complicated thing, right? It's simple to do, but it's complicated to do well. And I say that in that you can fall in love, most people quite easily, but to stay there and to do it well and to love with commitment and to love with passion and to love with purpose, those are very complicated things to master. So I kind of, at least right now, it isn't my focus in life because I am focused on raising my children. Well, this last one at home. But it just isn't something that I'm like, I'm going to run out and fall in love. Yeah, I'm not interested in that right now.
Honestly, I can't really blame you. The thing I like to focus on is love is definitely like a noun. It's a thing, but it's also a verb. And I think as a verb, that's where it gets tricky. Because like you said, it's something that it's a continual thing you have to be mindful of. Regardless of how you feel about something or someone in the moment, are you going to continue to treat them in a very loving and compassionate and empathetic way? And at least for me, I was having this conversation with someone about a week ago. It's really hard for me to feel somebody's love or to trust that they love me if I find that they're not treating me in a very loving way.
Right.
Because, if I say I love you, when you're getting on my fucking nerves, I'm still going to talk to you and treat you in a loving way because, again, at least for me, that love is the lens with which I see the world and I decide to operate. So, and as a Christian, in our faith, a lot of what we see in the New Testament talks about being hidden in Christ so that the best of you shines through and the worst of you, you can hide that in Christ and let him come through for you. So in my mind, somebody's been a little brat. I said I love her. I'm going to talk to her and communicate and try to figure out a better way to deal with the irritation or whatever. But I still have the choice to treat her in a loving way or be an asshole right back. And I'm not too keen on people who say they love you, but then they treat you in a very not so loving way. So I agree. It's a lot of damn work.
Oh, yeah. Having learned a lot of those lessons, I now, I have people in my life that I love, but it's a different kind of love, a different level of commitment. But you also get that, sometimes the people you love piss you off. And I will absolutely say in the moment, I love you, but you are not my favorite person right now, and I'm going to my room. And I don't have a problem with that.
I've been wishing for a girlfriend like that. Do you know how fucking I would get turned on by some shit like that? Apologizing, trying to make shit right. 'Cause that right there is a beautiful thing to hear. I'm upset. Give me 5 minutes. Give me an hour. I don't want to deal with you right now, but I'm going to come back. That's a beautiful fucking thing, at least to me.
Part of it, and I get that, and I think why people respond positively to that is because part of the temperament of what you were talking about earlier, as far as people who say they love you but don't treat you in a loving manner, is that there's always this underlying thread of the fear that this person who says they love you doesn't really love you. I think that statement, when I say that I love you, but you are not my favorite person right now, it goes to the point of calming that fear to say, she loves me, but she's just upset. And humans have a right to be upset. What they don't have a right to do is treat the person that they love as the thing that is upset. I'm like, I can't expect you to be upset for me. And therefore, I'm not going to say something to make you upset. I'm going to tell you that I am upset and that I need a break. I'm coming back. That's all people want to know. He needs a break. He's going to come back. But when you just railing off on somebody and yelling and screaming at them, and then you go away, they don't know if you're going to come back. Because the last time you were really upset and cursed them out. Now, I'm not leaving my life like that. I'm not leaving anybody that I care about in my life like that.
And that actually leads to my next question. Like you said, at least where you are right now in terms of your perspective, your focus is on, I'm going to assume here, the quality of your sex, the quality of your relationships, and in the meantime, you're very intentional and you're very communicative. So how has over the last few years, as your focus on your sensuality and how you define sexy and all those wonderful things that we've been talking about, as you've gotten a firmer understanding of what those things mean for you, how has that impacted your sex and or the quality of your relationships?
Well, my sex is amazing, so let's just get that out of the way.
I would hope so, shit.
I don't have bad sex. I just don't. I can't do that. I'll tell him or her. I'm like, no, we're not doing this. This is not working for me. But all that aside, the relationships are solid and they're good because I am transparent. And so my transparency kind of demands transparency in return. There's no guessing games. There's no games, period, because I am clear and true and open about what it is I want and what it is we're doing. And if he is not on board, and I say he specifically because I am only in relationships with men currently, I don't want him to think that I'm playing any kind of games because I don't have time for that. And therefore my expectation is that we treat each other the same, and that if I'm going to be open and clear with you, then you are open and clear with me. And I let him know from the beginning, if this is not something that you are willing to do or that you can't handle, tell me. It's okay. There will be no hard feelings.
I try to be the same way. I mean, I'm definitely far from perfect, but the quality of my life and quality of my relationships improved so much when I made transparency like brutal, raw, well, what feels like brutal, raw transparency. I'm not like a dickhead out here, but when the focus became more on making sure that people are well informed so that when they make decisions to spend time with me or to share with me, that they really know what they're getting into, the type of man that I am and the type of man that I am seeking to be, things just got so much better. the quality of my friendships just improved and blossomed in such a crazy way. So I'm a big fan, a big proponent of open, honest, and consistent, transparent communication.
If you run into someone who has a problem with honesty, run the opposite direction.
And block their ass.
As fast as you can.
But I know that we've been having such a dope conversation. I have one or two final questions for you. Oblige me. If there were three things that when you think about your legacy of what you want the world to know about you and your work and why it's important, and if you could curate your own exhibit in a museum focused on your work as like the section about erotic poetry or anything like that, what would you want these three things to be?
Well, first, again, the wide open woman is important to me because I think, and I say this in the book, it expands from the curious and courageous to the hellraisers and heathens. There is room for all of us. And there's no judgment or shame regardless of which side or where you sit on the range. You know, I say my book is for the most closed off woman to the most open woman. So I would say yes, wide open woman because it encompasses all of us. The other would be self-love because it really is about me showing love for self and hopefully inspiring others to have love for themselves. And then third would be Christianity and sexuality because it took me a while to find my space. And I know that I'm not the only one who struggles with that. And so to be someone who others who are in that struggle could come and say, okay, I get it. I see where she's coming from and have an understanding that you can, yes, be of the faith and still have a full and open sexual life. It was a struggle for a while there.
You said a lot of juicy things. I'm excited to explore a little bit more. If you could also add, your signature line in chapter 2, verse 2 of the Book of Huey, what would your tagline of sorts be to summarize your ethos in this episode, your kernel of wisdom that you want to put forth?
Wow. I would have to say it would be one of my favorite poems. It's called Soul Snatch.
I like it already.
Yeah. It's words from Soul Snatch in that the opening is, I want some soul snatching, re-virginizing sex. Some make you have to learn to walk and talk again sex.
Shit, me too. Me too.
We should all want that. And that's why I say that it is all encompassing for the sexy poet. Because you should want to have that level of intensity and passion in your sex.
I'm getting aroused. For me,
that's good.
My contribution to this week's chapter and verse of the Book of Huey would be what you just said a minute ago. Find your space. I think one of the first steps of living your truth out loud, which is, I don't know, maybe that's my theme for 2018, is to be comfortable sitting with yourself. So like earlier in this episode, you talked about issues with feeling or being pretty and what that meant and how others interacted with you. And, my take on a lot of what we've talked about is you taking that experience back and defining it all for yourself so that you've chosen to interact with the world differently than it's interacted with you. You're a fighter, you're a survivor, but you had many years and many experiences of just learning how to engage through that discomfort. And I think that is a part of our shared human experience that all of us can identify with. And I would just want to encourage anyone, whether it's, like you said, figuring out how to integrate their faith or their guiding principles, interacting with their family members, raising their children, just figuring out the strengths and the persons that they want to be known and perceived as when they engage in the world. find your space and own it and be comfortable in it. And until you are comfortable with it, get comfortable being uncomfortable with it so that you can see yourself naked in the mirror every day and find a sense of love and peace and acceptance about who you are at that very moment. Again, anyone with any sort of struggle, and we all have them, just learn to love yourself in the midst of that struggle, or really whatever that pitfall is for you. Still love yourself today, despite whatever obstacles are before you. And I think, at least for me, it's definitely made my journey that much easier and more joyful along the way.
Right. And it's really learn how to take care of yourself, because no one else is going to do that for you. Not once you're an adult. Your parents are not going to do that for you.
And they won't do it like you should, or like you would,
exactly.
The same level of love and care. So I'm inspired. I'm aroused. Thank you, baby. I really appreciate you being on the show. I can't wait to have you back on. Where can we find your work? So you can find my work at www.thesexypoet.com. And I am excited that Tales from the Sexy Poet for the Not So Tame and Tight is newly released. And I am hoping to get some dates out there shortly. I know I'll be in Maryland doing some readings at a Valentine's Day party the weekend of the 17th. And then I hope everybody can check me out. Definitely. When you get those dates, let me know. I'll make sure to put them out on all our channels. You can follow us. Well, one, go to thebookofhuey.com. All of our episodes are there. All of our information about where you can subscribe and tune in. But also, you can go to iTunes, Android, Google Play. Still waiting on Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, Blueberry. There's so many other of apps. But we're also on Facebook. I have a fan page. I have a discussion group. Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter. Ask FM if you have any anonymous questions you want to send our way. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
On behalf of the Book of Huey podcast, thanks for tuning in. Talk to you next week. This is your announcer, Rebecca Lee, signing off. And remember, folks, I want some soul snatching, re-virginizing sex. Some make you have to learn to walk and talk again sex. We should all want that. You should want to have that level of intensity and passion in your sex life. Damn it, Vi. Huey's aroused. Hell, I'm aroused now too. Got me out here wanting to send some hey big head messages and shit. Let me go find my space because my truth out loud right now wants to go learn and walk and talk again. In the words of the immortal Tiffany Haddish, she ready.